Hey y'all. So more recently I'd been paying attention to, a lot of discourse that's surrounding video gaming right now. And me, I'm a gamer. I've been gaming since I was a child. It's something that I really enjoy. It really helps me to connect with other people and I just really enjoy it. It's one of my it's pretty much my favorite hobby of all time. And it's kind of sad because in the year 2026, we've kind of been seeing a decline in gaming. I mean, I would say it's been going on for longer than that, but specifically what I wanted to talk about is this discussion about digital media and physical media. And usually when I used to think about these things, I usually thought of it as like digital media versus physical media, but I really think there are true pros and cons to both versions. You know, like because, I was kind of in that sense of like, "Oh, physical media, it's better than digital because you have this physical copy and no one can take it away from you," and all that stuff, right? And that is, there's a lot of truth behind that. There's a lot of weights behind that kinda argument, right? But truthfully, there are merits to having a digital library and merits to having a physical library, and I really think it's a good thing, in my opinion, to have a bit of both. Now, one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this is because, as everybody knows, Sony, PlayStation, right? They came out and they basically said, like, we have plans to just continue. We're not going to do any more physical distributions. We're not going to make any physical discs or any physical video games. We're just going to stick purely to digital. And that really is a shame because it's such a cool thing. Like, if you're into physical gaming, right? Like collecting video games, it's a cool thing to collect those games, put them on display. And there's just so much that you can do with physical gaming. Like, back when I was a kid, right? We didn't have digital gaming. It really wasn't a thing, before the digital age, before things were, before you could get games on like a digital storefront, you pretty much just had discs and cartridges. That's pretty much all you had, right? And it was a good time because since we all had physical games, in a lot of senses, people were very used to trading games with their friends. Or, you could just lend a game to your cousin, or you could just borrow a game from your friend, or, like you could swap games. You could be like, "Hey, I have a copy of, Toy Story 2 for the PC. You wanna try it out?" And, you could just lend it to someone, and, you could just be like, "Hey, this game's really cool. Check it out. Why don't you try it?" And then they give it back to you, right? Or, if they're a really sucky friend, they don't give it back to you. And that was also a problem. But um, for me as a kid, the pre-digital age, so to speak, right? That's not really the best way to put it, right? But before there were like digital storefronts and all that stuff and like digital libraries, like as a kid, physical gaming helped me to even game at all. Gaming to a degree was always like a luxury or, like an extra expense. So it's like if you had extra income, yeah, sure, you could buy brand new stuff, but it was usually pretty expensive. And so for me, I was always like a generation behind. But when I really got into like console gaming, it was because my cousins and, my friends, they would have these consoles and they'd be like, "Oh," like my cousin, he had a Game Boy Color, and that was already at a time when the DS was out. And he was like, "Oh, I don't really use this console." He saw me looking at the Game Boy Color, like, I was like kind of just I grabbed onto it and I was just kind of looking at it. Um and he noticed that I was kind of looking at it and he's like, "Hey, you know what? Like, I don't really use that Game Boy Color. I've got Pokemon Gold, I got Pokemon Yellow, I got all these games. If you really want, you could just take it. I'll just give it to you." And I was like so happy to have like having Pokemon Gold as a kid was just a fun thing. And he just gave it to me because like he was like, I don't really play it. You can have it. You'll probably enjoy it much more than I will, right? And it was so nice of my cousin to do that, and, like, I have other friends and cousins who were like, "Hey, like, I already have an Xbox One, or I already have, this console. I've got this old Xbox 360 just kinda sitting around. I've got all these Xbox 360 games. Why don't you just take it? Just take it. You're gonna get more enjoyment out of it than I would just having it sitting around in the house gathering dust," right? And even my cousin more recently, this year, he was like, "I got an Xbox One. It's just collecting dust in my house. Just hang on to it for a bit. If I somehow want it back at some point, you can just give it back, but here, just kinda hang on to it for a bit." And so, like, for me, physical gaming is, like, a huge part of how I get to enjoy so many excellent games, just friends and family being like, "Hey, have this game. Just take it, you know? And that's like if there's just a world where it's just digital gaming, then I feel like there's a lot of lost potential for people that get into gaming, for people to give away or lend or just share games with other people, you know? Because if you just have like a let's say like a PlayStation 6, right? It doesn't have a like a disk drive and it's just got digital games on it. You really can't, you know, unless you just give your whole console away and maybe it's logged into your account, you know, maybe you could share the game that way, but like, you know, it's in the digital age, everything is so like you have a profile and all your games are in that profile and you can't really give another person your profile. There's you know, I'm sure if you really try, there's ways that you can work around all that stuff. I'm not gonna I'm not gonna get into the weeds of all that because that's not how I don't share digital games in that way. I'm just, you know, I'm not gonna get into that conversation because I don't know a whole lot about it, right? That's what I'm gonna say. But what I'm trying to get at is that this year things have changed are just changing so fast, you know, like Nintendo came out with the Switch 2 and they're like, all right, like some of our games, they're just going to be key cards. And basically the key card is this like strange, it's basic, the way I see the key card, it's basically digital gaming, but you get a little cartridge, right? That's basically how I see it. Because you get this cartridge, there's not really anything on the cartridge. There's just a little bit of information on the cartridge that says, hey, if this person puts this in their Switch, they have permission to download a digital copy of this game from the store. That's basically what it is. So it's you don't really have this game, you just have access to the digital game. It's basically a digital copy, but you get a cartridge with it, and that cartridge doesn't have the game on it. It's just it just tells you, hey, you have permission to download the game. And in my opinion, I think that kind of sucks because it's not, you know, for me with my Switch One, I have so many of the games that I have are physical. You know, I have a physical copy of Mario Odyssey, of Breath of the Wild, of I even at the time had a digital copy of like Hades and Spyro, and like for me, it's just better that way because it's reading the information off of the cartridge. You know, not that there's anything wrong with having a digital copy of a game. It's just like it's nice to have that feeling of like, hey, this game, this cartridge right here, it's got all of Mario Odyssey on it. This cartridge right here, it's got all of Breath of the Wild on it, and it's so cool. Like this idea of like I have this game right here in my hand, and if I just want to, you know, lend it to someone or give it to someone, I could do that, or sell it. I could sell it to a friend or I could sell it to GameStop. I don't know why I would do that because they'd probably just give me like 2 cents, but but like I could do that, you know. Um, and you know, of course, with Sony, you know, Sony really is a lot of people really just don't like Sony PlayStation right now. You know, a lot of people are really upset with them. Um, I mean, I would be upset with them too. I don't really play games on PlayStation, so I don't really care too much. But realistically speaking, because Sony PlayStation is making this move into just digital games and not really producing any physical games, this, in a sense, is going to influence the other gaming companies like Nintendo and Xbox potentially to go fully digital at some point, you know, and that would be if if Nintendo and Sony and Xbox all went to just digital, that would suck. That would be a huge blow against gaming. That would be detrimental, I think, to gaming culture and just gaming as a hobby. You know, it would really, you know, people could talk about the secondhand market, just being able to, it would suck to not be able to lend games to your friends. You know, it would just suck overall for the hobby, you know? And in a sense, I kind of want to, you know, Xbox is to a degree involved in this because, you know, semi recently, I bought Assassin's Creed Rogue. Not an incredibly good game, but it's okay. It's an okay game, all right? It's all right. I bought it physical and I put it into my Xbox One, and I was expecting that I would be able to play the game off of the disc. But it doesn't do that because when you have a physical game and you put it into an Xbox, at least an Xbox One and probably higher than that, right? You put the disc in and it downloads a digital copy off of the store, off of the digital store, right? And when you have the disc in, it basically tells your console like, "Hey, you have permission to play this game, to play the digital copy of this game." Basically, it's not reading the game off of the disc, as far as I understand. So it's still there. It's still like this weird in between of like digital and physical. It's very similar to the Nintendo key card, you know, game key card, right? And that's not great. You know, if I have a copy of Fusion Frenzy and it's a physical copy, or if I have a copy of, I don't know, Donkey Kong Bonanza or some other Nintendo game from the future, right? Uh, in my opinion, I think that cartridge or that disc should have the full game on it, because why else would I buy this weird physical thing that doesn't have the game on it? It's weird. And with Nintendo, we'll specifically talk about Nintendo for a bit, right? Because I want to get into this idea of like lost media, or just like media that's not very accessible, more semi recently ish, right? You had like the 3DS, you had DS games, and you really can't play DS or 3DS games anymore. Not really. I mean, unless you have a DS and you have a 3DS and you have those games, yeah, sure, you can play them. But if you were not into those systems when they were first out, for the most part, you're kind of out of luck, all right? Unless you go into the secondhand market, then yeah, you can have access to those games. And what I'm trying to get at is that Nintendo has such a huge library of so many games, so many GameCube games, so many DS and 3DS games, and just a whole bunch of games, and you can't access them. Sure, you have the Nintendo Switch Online, but that's just a subscription. You don't own those games, and you have to pay a membership, and you can't even play all of the games, and you get drip fed the games. If you subscribe to NSO and you're like the first day subscriber, you have to wait to gain access to like to good games or to better games. You only get like a small select, especially like for the GameCube games, right? There's only like, I don't know how many games it is. It's probably like 5 or 6 games at this point. There's not a whole lot of games that you can play for that GameCube NSO thing. And there's a bunch of games I'm sure on the N64 that are missing, or the Game Boy Advance that are missing. There's a lot of games that are not there, So if you want to play those older games, you just don't have access to them. And that really sucks. I want to get into this idea of like lost media, like these games that you just really don't have access to unless you have a physical copy. Then yeah, sure, you could probably play it in some degree, right? But I was thinking about all of these games that like you really can't, there's no easy access to them. For example, Marvel's Ultimate Alliance. There are these Ultimate Alliance games. You could be all of these like Marvel superheroes. You could play with 3 other people, 4 people total, right? And that was such a fun time on the Xbox. I remember playing with my cousins, and it was fun playing with him, like just being Spider-Man or Nightcrawler or the Incredible Hulk or the Thing, or all of these heroes. And it's a fun game, and you really can't buy it anywhere because it's not accessible. Probably something with licensing, right? You really can't buy Marvel's Ultimate Alliance, and it's the same thing with some of the Spider-Man games. You can't really buy Spider-Man's Edge of Time or Spider-Man's Shattered Dimensions. Those were games that I played on the Wii as a kid, and I have an Xbox One, and I was like looking through the store, like, hey, I wonder if they have these Spider-Man games on here, and they don't. Those Spider-Man games, they're not accessible. You can't buy them. There's other games like the Deadpool video game that used to be on the Xbox 360. From what last I saw, there you could probably get like a digital or physical copy, right? You could get a physical copy, but it's gonna cost you, probably $100 or something. That's a lot of dollars for an old video game, right? It's kind of the same with Pokemon Emerald, right? Like, yeah, there's rumors that that Nintendo is eventually gonna release a digital copy of Pokemon Emerald, how they did with Fire Red and Leaf Green, right? But as of right now, if you want to play Emerald, you got to get a physical copy of the game, and you have to have a Game Boy Advance or a DS, and you're probably gonna pay $100, probably more than that, right? It's it's kind of crazy. And so it's just a shame that there's so many cool video games that are just not accessible because if they were, a lot of those games were released physically. So if you have a physical copy of that game and you have a console that can run it, then yeah, you have access to that game. But I think what I'm trying to get at is like you really do kind of need this blend of both physical and digital gaming, especially for game preservation. Because one of the cool things about, for me, especially for this channel, just talking about these older video games, I just like talking like, hey, this game's really cool. Do you guys remember doing this? And do you remember how cool this was? And I like talking about these nostalgic memories for myself. And other people, I've gotten comments from other people that say, hey, thanks for reminding me that this game exists. Just thanks for reminding me about these memories and stuff. And it's nice to have that connection of things from the past. And it would be even better if I talk about an older game and I can tell people like, "Hey, you can still access this game on some digital store somewhere, or you can get a physical copy of this game somewhere." Like, that would be that would be the best way to end a video, you know? Like, "Hey, you can still play this game." But sometimes it's just like, I'll talk about a game and it's not really accessible, and so, you're out of luck unless you do emulation, and, there's legal stuff tied to emulation, so it's a whole thing, you know? But, yeah, we don't I really just don't want gaming to be purely digital because there's so many potential problems that would come from if all of the gaming companies were just like, "All right, we're just gonna be digital," it would be terrible because you can't lend your games to people, you can't borrow games, you can't give them away, you can't sell them. The gaming companies would just have total control over the prices, and do you think the gaming companies are gonna give you a good deal on a game if you can only get it from them? It would be like I don't know, Nintendo's an easy person to go after or a company to go after, right? But you're gonna be buying an old DS game, or you're gonna be buying an old gaming console game for like $60 or maybe $80, because it's a premium game. You gotta pay a premium price, right? That would be the worst gaming future that I could imagine, in my opinion, right? Um, but there's also points where, like, if everything's digital, you have there's so much, like, things that could go wrong. What if the servers go down? What if your internet drops? What if you lose access to your profile? What if there's a hack? All right, what if your profile gets hacked? Or worse, what if the one of the servers for one of the gaming companies or whoever it is, right? What if that server gets hacked and you lose your information or you lose access to your games or whatever it is, right? I'm sure that happens when they do maintenance and all that stuff. You have to keep the security high. You have to make sure that everything's working properly. And if it doesn't work properly, then the servers are just down and the internet's just down and you can't access any of your games. And now what are you going to do? Like, it's really good to have a mixture of both the physical games and the digital games. And I I have both. I really do have both, you know? I really enjoy Steam. I've been wanting to invest more in my Steam library, it's just so nice to have easy access to all my digital games, and it's so cool to, like, because imagine you're in the situation where you need to move maybe from an apartment to a home or whatever, right? You gotta move somewhere. If you have a digital library, you can just get your laptop, go somewhere else, and you have access to all your games still as long as you got your profile, right? But even so, I don't know if Steam is going to be a cool company forever, right? At some point, Steam might be like, all right, well, if you want access to your profile, you're going to have to pay for a membership, or who knows what, right? Or maybe, God forbid, right? Maybe Steam shuts down and then now all your games are gone, right? Like, that could happen. It's probably not super likely, but it could. It's You want to have a combination of both those physical and those digital games, and that's kind of why I've been in going into Blu-ray, collecting Blu-ray movies. Because and here's a weird thing, I'm so surprised that this even exists, right? When you buy a Blu-ray movie, sometimes those Blu-ray movies will come with, like, a digital code, right? Like a digital download. So you got this physical copy of this movie and you've got a digital copy of it. You got both. And it would be so cool. Could you imagine a gaming future where you buy a physical copy of a game and it's like, "Hey, you want to have the digital copy too? Just have both copies." You know how cool that would be? Of course, they're probably not going to do it. But it would be really nice, like, just imagine. Imagine you buy a copy of, like, Mario Odyssey 2 and Nintendo's like, "Here, have the digital copy and have the physical copy. Have both of them." That'd be so cool. That'd be, like, the best thing ever? Um, that's more or less what I have to think about that. I really hope that things get better. I don't wanna be this bleak person that's like, "Oh, gaming is sucks and things are getting worse and they're just gonna keep getting worse," and, I don't wanna be like a doomer, right? I don't wanna just be negative all about it. My hope, I really hope that games just overall can be preserved, can be accessible, that I can play, the games that I buy, and that hopefully someday my children or my grandchildren can play whatever games I happen to have, and that they'll have access to a lot of classic video games over time. And it would be even cooler. I don't know if this is ever gonna happen, right? But, I really think, at least in America, right, that some laws need to be put into place to help protect consumers and their digital purchases. And I really hope that changes someday soon. But you know, I don't have a whole lot of faith in Congress. That's just, that's just how America is, overall. But anyway, sorry, I wanted, here I am trying to say, hey, I want to end on a positive note. And here I am like, oh, yes, American politics. It sucks, doesn't it? But anyway, thank you for listening to me. Thank you for watching. Hopefully, I said something entertaining or valuable or thought provoking. Hopefully, because I never want to waste your time. I always want to give you something to think about or something entertaining to think about. That's always my hope. But, since you've listened to me so long, if you want to get engaged with the conversation, drop a comment, tell me what you think, or tell me about your gaming memories, any of that fun stuff. I do like to read the comments. I find it kind of enjoyable. So, if you want to do that, I would love to read what you guys have to say. But nonetheless, thank you for being here. I appreciate you so much. I have to do the obligatory YouTube stuff, right? Subscribe and like and comment, all that fun stuff, right? But my channel is pretty small, and any subs or likes or comments, if you feel so inclined, that would really go a long way. But don't feel like you have to. If you don't want to, that's perfectly fine. I respect you, and I respect do what you want, more or less, right? Y'all have an excellent day. Thank you for being here, and y'all take care. I'll see you later.